Welcome back on Deynontech. Today I want to propose you a video about the unboxing review about the White Dwarf issue 460 released by the Game Social for January 2021. So this is the first White Dwarf of this year. Okay, I know that I published the first of this month, the White Dwarf about December, but this is the White Dwarf of the new year. So we can start to see now this one, starting from the cover, where there is a Spears Emperor 1, and it's an amazing chapter that will be have all the background, all the rules inside, and I can anticipate you that they are really quite amazing. But before we have to go to see everything that is inside this one, so now we can begin open it. Here we have the alternative code that we see better at the end of the White Dwarf. Here the theme of the White Dwarf. Here the description about the two main things of this White Dwarf, that are the Emperor's Spears and the Gargant's ones that are inside here, and there are a lot of interesting things to read about inside this White Dwarf itself. Then we can flip and we can find here the content that are inside the White Dwarf itself. And we can find a lot of nice anticipations about. Then we can flip, we can find here that it's the mailing list of the readers to the White Dwarf authors, and I think that can be quite interesting because there can be really quite interesting options to see. Scheme of colors, but also, for example, ways to modify the bases and so on. So there are a lot of things that I think can be a good suggestion of how you can develop your own miniatures. At least you can try to take some of these things, for example, some concepts, some ideas about how to paint some details or so on. I think that they can be quite amazing. Here, about Imperial Knights deployed, or better, this is really a Titan way to deploy them. Really quite amazing if you see how many there are about the Titans deployed. So really quite a big Titanicus battle. And here we can find instead an article released by Jordan Green, and it's about, I can say, how you can develop the background of Age of Sigmar based on the giants. So this is about the really big monsters, so the Gargants monsters that has been in the background about Age of Sigmar, and here we can find their description, at least about some of them, of the most famous of them, and I think that they can be really quite interesting about to understand better the background and also how to develop the background about a special beast and so on. So really quite amazing. Then we can flip and we can find this, that it's about Warhammer 40k with the Emperor's Spears, and here we can find something that can be really quite amazing, because here we can begin moving, talking about the flashpoints with this, that it's the chromed front, so other background with other rules related about. Here there are a lot of information. If you are interested about, I think that these White Dwarfs, at least from some months till now, with this way, it's a good way to move on a campaign, so to create and to develop a campaign, releasing artworks, releasing background and so on. That can be really quite interesting because they make the developing, but at the same time they produce quite a lot of interesting contents. Sincerely, I'm almost hoping, even if I have all this, the White Dwarf with all this background, that there will be a releasing of a book with all these things together, so to have something that you can, I can say, have everything all together, so not divided in a lot of different, in this case booklet has the White Dwarfs, but only a single point where there is all the campaign, so quite interesting. Here there is, I can say, a sort of novel related about that can be really quite amazing, really quite interesting, with a really amazing artwork. I really like these artworks because they can be quite interesting if you're going to play the Death Guard or similar one. These artworks can be really quite an inspiration. And then there are, as I said, the rules to play, so really quite good. And there are a lot of options that if you're going to play with this, obviously now it's not so good to go outside and play a campaign and so on, but it's a really great way to know how you can develop it, so understand how you can make and master it in the case that you want, when we'll be more able to go out and so on, to create our own campaign and so on. I think that it would be a really great experience about, because there are a lot of amazing options inside. And here there is this army gallery that it's made by Danny Petrie, and this is about the Death Watch. So it's really quite an interesting army, how has been deployed, modified and so on. As you see, each base has been characterized. Also I can say the different models and so on has been modified and is being characterized. Really quite amazing one. So I think that there are a lot of options that you can take note about. For example, how to realize these conversions and so on. I think that you can have a lot of suggestions to take note about. See these ones, for example, really quite amazing way to use deposits and so on. Really quite amazing. And here what I talked before, so the index artists related about the Emperor's Spear, so the background about them. And sincerely, I suggest you not to read it. You ask me why? Because you'd fall in love for them if you read this background, and you risk to want to collect an army of them, because they are really quite a good and amazing one as background. So if you want to risk to have to collect this one, and this is the artwork that we've seen here but complete, really read. If you want to risk to have to collect another army or a army of Space Marine, of this Space Marine, start to read these ones. If you want to really to risk it, read it, because it's an amazing one, really amazing. And then we have the rules. Want to remember you that these are original and legal rules, so you can use these ones in your battle games. So really quite interesting. And then we have how to paint them, so how to realize this blue color and so on, and how to make a lot of different options on about them. I really like anyway these ones, and really you risk, but they are worth in the case. I really like these scheme of colors. I know that they are mainly related about the ultramarines and so on, but I prefer this scheme of color than the one about the ultramarine. I think that it's really quite awesome, and I like their background and so on. So I'd really like, moreover, because they are really quite associated with, for example, the Celestial Lions and so on. So really quite a good way to cooperation, a good way to make the markers and so on, that they are quite amazing. And then here instead we can begin with a new Tale of Warlord. In this case, they anticipate you that they will creating the one about the 40k and then another one about Age of Sigmar. So we see that probably alternative one we find this progression about them. Anyway, here we can find this the Sons of Medusa from this one. Here we can find the Thoth Dynasty. I love such dynasty, it's one of my favorite as background and so on, but I like also to see this scheme of color applied to realize them. I not use this scheme of color for my personal army of Necrons because I'm developing one, but I really love such one. So I think that once that I finish what I'm planning about my army, main army about the Necrons, the third one will be the next one that I realize, because I'll create some detachment and so on related about other dynasty about Necron, I think. Here we can find about the sisters, so we can find how it has been used, this scheme of color and so on, can be useful to understand. It's nice, these, for example, base and so on that has been realized. Here we can find this, that it's about the orcs, so also here can be quite interesting. And here instead we can find this one that it's the article that starts with Age of Sigmar, but moreover about the Gargants, that the Sons of Behemot, I want to remember you, it's the last of the books about the Battle, about the Age of Sigmar tomes that has been released. And here they explain you how has been developed the idea and the profiles related about the Gargants, so the Son of Behemot. This one's really quite interesting and something that I haven't seen from a lot of times, something such good realized. Here we can find the designer notes about such army, and I think that it's really quite interesting to read about, with the description about some details and so on. So really quite an amazing one. So really, if you're going to use this one as reading, you can have a lot of ideas also how you can personalize them, maybe because they told you how they wanted to include some things and so on. So there can be maybe a way to make you understand how you want to personalize, how you want to characterize your own army. Here we can see an example how it is being painted. Here, for example, we could maybe think about this to have an example of what we'll have in the future about zombie, new zombie ones. Okay, here the scheme of color, and here we can find how there is the difference in size of this. So this it's a gargantuan, the son of Behemot one, and here it's the goblin. Here the progression about the dimension compared. So really quite amazing. See the difference between a gargant, so this one, and a giant, a normal giant. Really quite amazing. So something really to take note about, because if you want to understand how big it is, this is as much as it is big. So really quite awesome. Then we can move and see other options. So for example, we can see other personalization that we have combining and modifying and so on. So we can really create a lot of different things of these models. So this is only the beginning, and we can characterize it really quite amazing. Really, I'm not going to buy these models, but they are really quite tempting because they have a lot of options of comparison, of idea of how to realize them. Really quite amazing. And here another painting guide about how to paint. So for example, how to realize the face, these mantos, these effects. I think that there are a lot of things that it's interesting to see about this one. Think about these colors of gold and bronze. Really quite amazing. And also here you can see a lot, for example, these details about the eyes and so on. Okay, it's easier about the eyes here because it's bigger than the eyes of a normal miniature, but really you have a lot of different options, and here you have a lot of inspiration about how to paint different effects and so on. So I suggest to give a sight about this because they can be quite interesting. And here instead we can find a battle report about the gargantuans against the ogres. If you think that historically the ogres eaten the older ones of the gargantuans, I think that it's a really quite interesting one to note. So if you want to understand how it's played the gargantuans, it's a really nice way. I don't like this image because okay, in the video maybe you don't notice, but in reality the photo it's not done so great. It's a bit too bright anyway. Here instead we have the ogres, that it's always an amazing army to see. Here we have the battle report that we're going with the battle pen related, so quite interesting one. And then we can find the battle report itself. So if you're interested to understand how to play one of these armies, or you're interested to know how it can be played in Age of Sigmar, I think that it can be quite interesting to read this battle report. I really like to read these ones because I find them quite interesting way, because it's a way to know also armies that maybe I don't find them so often and so on. So at least it's a nice site to read, so it's quite interesting. Here we have a fiction related about the gargantuans, so a bit of background related about, and I find that can be quite interesting also this reading. And here how to play with the gargants against each other, so a sort of arena of the gargants that use an entire table to play each other against. So it can be quite interesting to read and having something to play in a different way a game. So it can be quite amazing. Also these images with these gargantuans in the middle of these ruins, anyway, it's quite amazing a sight to have, so quite nice. Here we have instead the new version of the underworld, that is the chasm, and so other suggestions about how to play and so on. I want to remind you that I don't play underworld, even if I like to collect some of the underworld models and sets that you can eventually find the box related about in the description. And here instead we have you can see a bit related about the Blood Bowl. Also about this I gain some of the set books because I like them, but here there is this because has been released a new one about Blood Bowl related about the Seraphon, and it's a really quite amazing set related about, so eventually you can go to see them. So this is a way to understand a bit about the not the environment, but I can say the mood about Blood Bowl, and I think that it's really quite interesting. Here we have about the tactica for the Adeptus Titanicus, so if you're going to play the Adeptus Titanicus, this can be useful to have a bit of knowing knowledge also about how to play it. Here instead an interview about the Black Rivalry to David Goymer, that it's an author that has written a lot of things, and also about the Ghost Slayer and the one about Slayer and so on related about Gotex Gunnison. So I suggest you to give a site about this because this is an interesting reading related. And here a new saga that has been begun of David Goymer. So this is something that we can be a sort of similar to what we have seen before with the Faith and Fire of the previous month of White Dwarf. So the 9 months before of the White Dwarf has been related about that publishing, and here instead we have that one, the Mother of Fire, here with this that it's now a 6th one of releasing. So till June it will be this one, and I think that it's quite interesting because in such a way you can have one book that you can collect during the time and having a reading about that. I think that it's quite interesting. Moreover, you can have also an idea of what you can find with the Black Library, and I collected a bit of book about the Black Library because I was quite interested about their publications, and so I suggest you to read such things because you can have an idea at least of what you can find. Sincerely, okay, I want to remind you that not always all the authors are the same, so there are authors that you can prefer or so on, there are films that you can prefer or so on, but still it's something that I think that it's really quite worth to be in this White Dwarf, and it's something that I appreciate that it's put in such a way so that you can have an idea of what you are going to have. And then we have this that it's outside the studio of what we see in the next issue about the White Dwarf. So for example with this motto of the Blood Angels, really quite amazing. For example, I like these details because we can see, okay, these helmets and so on, but these details and so on, that this for example comes from the Alien Speeder ones and other similar things. For example, the drop pod has these ones as symbols that can be quite interesting to personalize your army. So it can be really quite awesome as a site of what there is, maybe because you can be interested. For example, this one that it's the tale of this of Black Coach. So quite a lot of things that can be really quite amazing if you go to see them more carefully. And then here an anticipation of what we see in the next month, and we see better also later. Here the alternative cover that I said about you of this cover. This is related about, if this one it's about the Emperor Spears of Warhammer 40k, this is about the Behemots, so the Sons of Behemot for the Age of Sigmar 1. And here the final cover that is the Channel Kingdom, so the one related about the Flesh Eater Curse. I like this that it make you see about the Ostrich Reapers and the Flesh Eater Curse. They seem to be each other once against the other one. I don't think that they should be going to conflict because technically they eat the meat and they use the bones. But I'm quite interested about, because I'm quite curious about what it will be going happening. It's really quite interesting one. Sincerely, I like a lot this release about this White Dwarf because there are a lot of information. The Emperors of Spears are one of the things that I quite like, and the part about the Behemoths, the Gargants and so on, I think that they are really quite interesting because these Gargants are really quite amazing as developing of the background and so on. So really quite interesting. Moreover, there are also a lot of ideas about modifying painting and so on that I think that even if I'm not completely interested about, it can be quite interesting for the ones that appreciate such things. And you can add also the part about the novels, because there are the fictions that are quite interesting, so it can be seen as really quite an awesome release. Anyway, from Dynomod it's everything. I invite you to put a like on this video, to subscribe to the channel, to ring the bell, and to comment this video if you are interested in something about this video or you want to suggest me some arguments for other videos. I hope to see you again. To the next time.